Hi friends, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk about free consent under Indian Contract Act of 1872. In the Indian Contract Act, the definition of consent is given under section 13, which states that it is when two or more persons agree upon same thing in the same sense. And free consent has been defined under section 14 of the Act, and this section says that consent is considered free consent when it is not caused or affected by following. So there are around five components of free consent, and if any consent is caused because of these five things, then such consent cannot be considered as a free consent. So we'll see those factors which are very important to determine whether a free consent is a free consent or not. And the first point I would like to discuss is coercion. Coercion is dealt under Section 15 of Indian Contract Act, and it means using force to compel a person to enter into a contract. If I threaten anybody or use any force against any person to obtain the consent of that person, that cannot be considered as a free consent, and it is merely a consent caused or obtained through coercion. And moving upon to the next point, that is undue influence, and it is dealt under section 16. Section 16 of the Act contains the definition of undue influence, and it states that when the relation between two parties are such that one party is in a position to dominate the other party and uses such influence to obtain an unfair advantage of other party, it will be an undue influence. So the example of an relationship or an undue influence would be, suppose if there is a teacher-student relationship, and if the teacher asks the student to enter into a contract, and in that situation the student uh, would think that he would not be in a position, or it would not be good to say no to the teacher, and he would say yes to the contract, and he will give consent even though he was not ready to give the consent. So such scenario will fall under undue influence, and we cannot say that this kind of if there is any consent given under undue influence, such consent is not a free consent as per the Indian Contract Act. And next is fraud, which is dealt under section 17 of the Act. Fraud means deceit by one of the parties. When one of the party deliberately makes false statements, so the representation is done with the full knowledge that it's not true, or recklessly without checking the truthlessness or the trueness of the statement which is made, and there is an intention to fraud the other party. And such consent, any consent given in such situation would not be a free consent, and it is very important that there must be an actual loss caused to the aggrieved party or the party who has suffered anything in the agreement. If there is no loss, the aggrieved party cannot claim for any damages in the court of law for the breach of contract or for any action against the specific performance act. So there must be a material breach of contract in order to claim damages for fraud. Otherwise, we have no right to claim damages for the fraud. And next is misrepresentation, which is dealt under Section 18 of the Indian Contracts Act. And a misrepresentation is also known when a party makes a representation which is false, inaccurate, or incorrect. The difference here is that misrepresentation is innocent, not intentional, whereas in case of fraud, misrepresentation is made fraudulently or with an intention to deceive the opposite party. And finally, we would move to mistake. And mistake is dealt under Section 20 and 21 of the Indian Contract Act. And a mistake happens when a person unknowingly made a statement or entered into a contract when there was a misunderstanding between the parties. Now, there can be a misunderstanding or a mistake of fact, or there can be mistake of law. And in both the situations, as per the law, contract is void. Mistake of fact is dealt under Section 20, and mistake of law falls under Section 21 of the Indian Contract Act. So I would like to conclude here. I hope I have explained the concept of free consent in simple words. If you have any suggestions or if you would like to add anything else to this topic, please leave your comments below. Thanks a lot. Bye.